Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and this is Tallow Basted Seared Ribeye. Well, today we're going to explore a steak cooking technique that's designed to maximize moisture, flavor, and texture. We're doing a pan sear with some Creek Stone Prime ribeye steaks, hot cast iron, which is a great way to get a nice crust on a steak. But at the same time, we're going to be basting. Now in the past, we basted with butter and or oil, where you're just spooning it over the top of the steak as it cooks. And that's a great way to get a lot of flavor and moisture and fat on the steak. But today we're gonna be using a garlic infused tallow, and that's where we're gonna get started. So all we need to make this is garlic and tallow. Now this is a jar of tallow that we've rendered from brisket trimmings that you can go check out the video on how to do that if you want. If you don't feel like doing that yourself, you can always just pick up a bucket of tallow over at atbbq.com. So we're gonna take a half cup of our tallow here, place it in a mason jar. And what we're gonna do here is we're essentially gonna cone feed this garlic in beef fat. Which sounds like a wonderful idea. Now the quickest way to get this garlic cone feed softened up anyway is to actually separate out these cloves, peel them, and then throw them in there individually rather than cooking the whole head all at once. So we just need to get the skins off of the garlic. And we've got a little trick for that. You throw them in a mixing bowl here, grab another one and put it on top, and shake the heck out of it. So that does a pretty good job of just taking the skins off for you. We're just gonna plop those down in the jar and throw that on the grill. But today we're cooking on the Yoder Smokers YS640S pellet grill, currently running at 350 degrees with hickory pellets. So this is gonna go right here on the main cooking surface. We've got the door removed because we're gonna be searing over the flame today. Right here I've got a jar that's already been on for about an hour. And this is gonna show you what that end product looks like. So if I reach in here and grab one of these cloves, you can see how this is just melting, soft to the touch. That's completely done. And that process, like I said, takes about 1 hour. All that tallow is gonna melt down, submerge the garlic, and completely cook it through, nice and gentle without over browning it. So we're gonna pour off that fat now, and this is the fat that we're gonna use to baste the ribeye, this garlic infused beef tallow. And we're not gonna let these garlic cloves go to waste. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna create a little compound butter here with roasted garlic and blue cheese. Kind of going to emulate some of the flavors you get out of dry aged beef. We're going to add our butter here to the roasted garlic. This is a cultured butter, so it's also got a little bit of extra funk to it already. And it's a salted butter, which I don't often use a salted butter, but it's going to work just fine for what this is today. We're going to add to that about a 1/4 cup of smoked blue cheese crumbles. So a lot of earthy funkiness going on here. And just a little bit of acidity with a tablespoon of our pit fire hot sauce. And then if this was unsalted butter, I'd add a little bit of kosher salt to it, but since it's already salted, we're just gonna add some fresh cracked black pepper. And now this we can just kind of mash all together, mash that garlic right into it. And once I get this fully incorporated, we're just gonna leave this at room temperature. Because the plan here is after we get our steaks seared off, we put a little butter down on the plate underneath the steak, and that steak just melts the butter underneath it, and a little bit of this butter on top of the steak to melt right into the meat. Let's have a little taste. Oh man, the garlic and the blue cheese together, incredible. This really does emulate some of those flavors you get out of a dry aged steak, which makes it a great way to finish a wet aged steak. When we talk about wet age, it's just inside the package that it's cryoed in. I'll show you right here. This right here is Creek Stone Prime ribeye steak, bone out, and you can actually age it inside of this package for about 30 days to really get some extra tenderness and flavor out of it. It's not the same as a dry aged steak. It's a much different process. You don't ever want to open it because as soon as you do and that oxygen gets in there, it can really start to spoil the meat. But if you leave it inside that cryo, a month in the fridge, just like that, it's gonna add a lot of flavor. Any longer than a month though starts to deteriorate, so I don't go much longer than a month personally. Back at the grill now, before we get these steaks seasoned up, we want to make sure our cast iron's nice and hot, ready for the sear. So we're gonna throw the Finex into the grill. We'll just scoot our tallow over for now. Also going to move the baffle all the way in to kind of concentrate all that heat right here in this hot spot. Now we also want to crank the temperature up to 500 now, or just a little bit higher. This is gonna constantly feed pellets to keep our fire hot. Let's go season the steaks. Now before we hit this with some rub, we're just gonna put a little bit of hot sauce on here for binder. You can use just about anything, oil, mustard. You're not gonna notice the flavor all that much in the end. Just something for that rub to stick to. And it doesn't have to be much. Well, speaking of the rub, today we're using the Cattleman's Grill California Tri-Tip. Now this is a great steak rub, savory flavors, onion, garlic, pepper. As you can see, it's really chunky too. It's got great texture to it. That's a little bit dangerous when you're searing steaks in a flat cast iron skillet though. So what we're gonna do today, throwing some into the spice grinder to break it down nice and fine. That way we don't scorch any larger pieces of the seasoning. And when we grind it down really fine like this, it just kind of melts into the meat. When we're doing large smoked pieces of meat, that texture, that chunky texture on the rub is a great thing. It helps with the bark. But when you're doing a hot and fast sear on a flat surface, you want to be careful not to scorch it. This kind of gets around that. All right, skillet's nice and hot now. So we're gonna get our garlic tallow down. Also gonna throw some rosemary and thyme in there. Just add a little bit of that herb essence to it. And I'm gonna just do one of these steaks at a time right now. You could fit both of them in here, but you're gonna get a better sear if you give it some good surface area. So go with a larger skillet if you wanna do two at the same time. And the idea here is it's gonna start to form a nice crust on the bottom. And then while it's doing that, we're gonna tip this down and grab some of this fat and just start to baste it over the top. You're already smelling the rosemary. We're actually cooking it from the top just a little bit while we do this. Now you don't have to baste the entire time that it's sitting there. You can also just let it sit, form that crust on the bottom, occasionally basting that fat over the top. But I'm not gonna close the door. I wanna make sure we get a nice crust on this without packing too much heat or keeping too much heat in there. That way the outside gets brown before the internal temperature comes up too high. Now, like I said, we're just over 500 degrees, which means that it's constantly feeding pellets, which means that it's constantly getting hit with that flame. On any other cooker, you're just gonna wanna make sure that it's as hot as possible, anywhere over 500 degrees. Well, it's starting to get some really nice color and sear on there. Use just a little bit more though. All right, let's check this out. That is a good looking sear on there. Time to hit the other side now. We're just gonna continue this process. Got our garlic herb tallow, basting that right over the top. And just look at the surface. When that fat hits it, it's like you're frying this steak with this hot tallow. Let's check the internal temperature to get a gauge for where we're at. Still in the 90s. That's great. That means we're gonna get a really great sear on the opposite side as well. It also means that for the time being, we can go ahead and close the door on the grill to speed up this process. All right, so we've come up to 130 now on the internal temperature. Pretty ideal for a ribeye for my taste. So we're ready to pull this thing off of here. So here's the plan. We put down a dollop of our blue cheese butter. We're gonna set the steak right on top of that. Another little dollop on top of the steak and just let it melt into it as it rests. Meanwhile, we'll go cook that other steak. So here's our first steak. It's rested for about 15 minutes now. Still temping at like 125 though, so it's still nice and warm. You can see all these juices that have collected down here. Some of that's juice, some of that's fat. You can see some of that fat suspended in it. All of it is flavor. Now this is our second steak. It's only been resting for a few minutes now. You can see how much less juice there is. It's gonna rest just a little bit longer before we cut into it. I'm gonna go ahead and slice into this first one and get a little taste of it. Just soak up some of these juices on here. It's unbelievable. It's the beefiest. It's so tasty. Just flavor. And it's nothing overpowering. It tastes like beef. All that tallow, all that juice that's come out, we're sopping it back up. And then the funkiness. I mean, you really almost get the impression that you're eating a dry aged steak because of that blue cheese inside that garlic butter. Super tender. For me, that's the cook I want. I want it 130 to 135, so some of that fat's rendered out. You don't get as much pink at that spot, but if you're cooking strips, go for it. 120, snag it off early. The ribeye and that fattiness just needs a little bit more time, just a little bit more heat. That's pretty well ideal. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out atbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to atbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.